Welcome to the spot. It's time to ignite. Oh yeah. Operation Hangout. The feeling's just right. Chilling with the crew. We're ready to groove. Opinions flying high. Come on, let's move. Hang out all night long, all night. Laughing and debating, playing our song. Oh yeah. Share your thoughts, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Operation Hangout, let's reach for the sky. Let's fly. Pull up a chair, let's get in the zone. Voices blending smooth like a funky trombone. Oh yeah. Topics from the heart, making us think. With a twist and a shout, raise up your drink. Cheers. Hang out all night long, all night. Laughing and debating, playing our song. Oh yeah. Share your thoughts, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Operation Hangout, let's reach for the sky. Let's fly. Bring it down, shake it up, feel the beat. With every word we share, the circle's complete. Living loud, think it proud, that's what we do. Oh yeah. Join the club, come on through, we're waiting for you. Alright. Hang out all night long, all night. Laughing and debating, playing our song. Oh yeah. Share your thoughts, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Operation Hangout, let's reach for the sky. Let's fly. Hang out.
What is going on, everybody? We're back at it with another episode of the Spartan HQ Network. Obviously, I am under the weather. I've been sleeping all fucking day, so let's get David in here so he can help me get through this rough night I'm having. I said I'm sick. I didn't say I'm not. I lost my sense of humor. What's going on, my man? How are you, brother?
Going on with you guys? I'm just mentally weird, but it is what it is. I'm not trying to be political.
Bro, you're always weird. So
Watching the stock market, watching the stock market crashing, and I'm like, who to blame for this madness? I wonder. But it is what it is.
I give you 5 guesses. You're gonna need one only on that one.
Yeah,
you know that. So let's get into the show, bro. You know the show I'm talking about. Something that you grew up on.
Pretty much.
I did too, actually, in a way. But go ahead. You got the floor first.
Ladies and gentlemen, this show, very interesting, very iconic for a lot of major reasons. Forgive me for the noise in the background. I have 3 stooges who lacked the common sense when they died on the show, but I will put them in the headlock sooner or later. But this show we're talking about, M.A.S.K, is not only iconic, but I felt like they didn't do this cartoon / anime justice for a lot of reasons, because it had a good storyline. Yet it did well with the merchandise and the selling of the toys whatsoever. But I felt it was one of those type of anime / cartoon that could have been redone or remastered The same way they did He-Man. Like, let's be real. How many times He-Man get a remaster or redone or revamped? Too many times. Thundercat got that same privilege. Well, Max didn't. Why? It was a cool ass program, I'm not gonna lie. Imagine you one that had masks that have all type of powers and privileges. Whatever vehicle you have, when you put the mask on, you transform to something much even greater than what it is. It was a cool type of plot to it. But I feel like it's not getting the respect due. That's just my point of view. But other than that, it was a great cartoon. I kind of enjoyed it. That is my monologue for this starting show. Give it to the next person.
What's good, gentlemen?
What's going on, Paul? How are you, buddy?
I'm okay.
Better than me right now. So we're talking about Mask.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you the floor for a minute. What you got on that?
Well, admittedly, I didn't watch a lot of the show when it was on. Show came on 85, 86. And I know my TV viewing started to change dramatically then because one, I was doing more things in high school. So it's not like I had a lot of free time after school. This is also before VCRs became widespread, at least in our home anyway, that you could sort of record it every day or whatever, and even if I had one, it was don't break down your name. You don't break down your name anymore. Okay. I may throw it out there again, but in any event, so again, when I was going into my junior and senior year of high school, I became a lot busier. So if you go back the year before, 84, I was home a lot more. And so Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Voltron, I mean, I was definitely more into those titles. But, Mask, I missed a lot of it. In fact, I had to kind of do a bit of a rewind. Now on YouTube, you can actually find the entire series on YouTube, all 75 episodes of it. And I watched quite a few just to kind of familiarize myself, and nothing came to mind because, like I said, I really didn't follow it that much. But interesting enough, I love the theme song though. I'm a big theme song head, so there's a lot of TV shows and themes that I just had an affinity for back in the day, and Mass was one of them. I remember knowing the song almost by heart, even back in the day, even though I didn't watch it a whole lot. So going back and watching it again and just kind of, or really not so much again, watching it for the first time, I enjoyed the product. Although again, I think they were just um, another entry to the party. Because like I said, you had G.I. Joe and Transformers that came out the prior year. Then also in 85, I think you had Thundercats. You had a lot going on. So it was a crowded field for them to compete in versus everything that was out at the time that was popping. And so I wouldn't rank the show certainly not above G.I. Joe nor um, Voltron nor Transformers. Definitely not Transformers, especially seasons 1 and 2. So so for me, that would be so I think it was, and that might have been all part of it also. The fact that I kind of seen, we already had kind of series out there that had similar theme. You had like a malevolent force versus a good force. Again, you had that with G.I. Joe, you had with Transformers. So it's just, again, this was just another one on the scene. And so how were they going to distinguish themselves versus what was already out there? And then again, you had GoBots, you had robotics, you had just like I said, all kinds of shows that were on at the time, and you can't watch everything. And like I said, so I had to be very selective with my watching back then. Again, going back to the whole VCR thing, again, we only have VCR. You can only record one program. I think my brother, I think he eventually bought a VCR, but he saved most of his recording for like basketball games and sports and things like that. So it's like I didn't have my own. It's not like today where you can have your own streaming devices and record what you want when you want it. So again, I missed out on a lot of it. Was able to catch up with a few episodes today. Again, good concept and series. I think for me the biggest thing, and I also watched some retrospectives on it. To me, the big thing was the drastic, and I do mean drastic change. Well, two things. One, the drastic change for season 2, which totally went against the formula that worked for the first 65 shows. And then the second thing was the 65 shows. Now, for a season, even back then, that's a lot of shows to put out in one season. You could have got away with probably half the number of episodes. 26, even back then, was considered a season. You did 65. You could have stretched out and elongated the lifespan of the show, had to spread it out a little bit more. But I've never heard, and in fact, I had to almost do a double take on it because I never recall, even with Transformers and G.I. Joe, they didn't spit out 68 plus episodes in a given season. So why you didn't just do half of that and then save? You could have had 3 or 4 years out of the show. And then by the time you got to after episode 65, you kind of changed the whole format altogether to one that I don't think was nearly as successful or popular. Certainly it went away from the original theme of the show. So to me, I don't, but again, this started just like Transformers. It started out as a toy line. There's no backstory. There's no canonized story. I know you had some comics that came out with DC Comics. They came out with a M.A.S.K series. There were a couple of them that did, to try to fill in some gaps and whatnot. But again, this was about selling toys. So they I don't think they were necessarily coming from the standpoint of what to do with the show. But the show was clearly a platform to sell the toy lines that they had. But again, I think way too much within a year. They could have had a much longer lifespan, especially when you consider Transformers and G.I. Joe were basically out by 1986. Because again, season 3 of Transformers, I think a lot of people would say was a disaster. And G.I. Joe, they kind of, ran its course at that time. And then they had the, by 86, 87, they had the G.I. Joe movie. So again, you could have had to fill the void where those shows were kind of dropping off. You could have you had so much content you could have filled with. And maybe it was a crowded field at the beginning, but you could have won the long game. So again, whoever was behind the show, to me, it's a bit of a disappointment because, you could have did a whole lot more to extend the life of the show and your toy line and marketability of the show coming into the late 80s, 88, 89. You could have had, owned a good, share of the market at the time. And again, by the time I was 87, I'm in college, so I definitely wasn't into cartoons were going on at that time when I was in college. I think Ninja Turtles came out, and I think there was a couple, but I wasn't. Like I said, I just wasn't in the thing. I get that, Mandrell. Yes, there were toy commercials, but I'm saying for the toys and for the series, you could have had a lot more life. Had to spread it out. There was no need for them to come out there's no TV series that needs to come out with any more than 26 episodes in a given year. They did 65 in the first year. And the show only ran for you can't even call it 2 seasons because the second season was only 10 shows. And then it was over. So again, I think the marketing of it, I think they just tried to kind of make a fast buck and get out. But they could have did a lot. They had a lot of content, obviously a lot of writers, obviously a lot of people who were able to put 65 shows together. And they just it just flamed out. Quick flame, quick burn, and it was over. So a lot of potential for the show. And you know, when I looked at the retrospectives and what behind it and whatnot, yeah, I walked away a little bit disappointed that with the strategy and you know, why did they decide to do that? 65 shows in a year is insane. And they were full 22-minute episodes, 30-minute episodes. You didn't have to do that. So that's my 10 cents on it. I think I put in more than 2 cents. That's my 10 cents on the on the show and on the topic.
Let me just say that I'm glad you did that and give it a history lesson and you add some information because, as I was saying earlier, yeah, you were right. There was a pack lineup of cartoons during that era. You mentioned Transformer, right? Transformer have how many
Transformers.
reboots did Transformer have been through? Up to so many. Yeah,
Oh,
G.I.
I can't.
Joe,
I lost count.
multiple
150, I
reboots.
think.
Yes, Thundercat, a couple of reboots, right? It's almost some of the heavy hitters of the '80s would able to come back at the present time. Correct? He-Man, multiple reboots. Max was still good up there, even though
3
you were
reboots on
correct.
that.
They would argue me having past. They would argue me having past show about you had 65 shows in one season, right? Which is a lot, a lot. We ain't gonna argue about that. But I felt as if Matt got overlooked on purpose for some parent reason because yes, we had to talk about Transformer. Transformer was all about toys. But somehow they're able to make that thing drag out to Generation 1, Generation 2, Generation 3, so forth. G.I. Joe was no different. Thundercat was no different. He-Man was no different. There are many other heavy hitters during the '80s that came out and come to cartoon, like the anime, even though we realize a lot of these cartoons were created by Japanese animators. But Masks was overlooked so bad to the point where I felt like with it. I don't know if their toy set wasn't poor at that time, was it? That's what I'm trying to comprehend is how all these other
I think
ones
at the
able to
time,
come back.
David, I think the toy sales. I think the toy sales were pretty decent for the '80s back then. You understand, '80s and '90s and 2000s, the toy sales market changed so dramatically back then. Well, I'll give you one thing: '80s, they build the toys to last. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, I mean that was certainly, I
You're
would
right,
say,
but
from the mid
the thing
'70s to
is,
the mid '80s, collectibles and whatnot. I mean, yeah, I mean quality was certainly up there.
Yeah. So we're going to say, David, go ahead.
but the thing is, math was what I'm trying to say. Math wasn't no poor made cartoon like Gobot. Gobot felt.
Yeah,
Gobot was competing with Transformer. Gobot actually fell and lost the battle with Transformer. Transformer looked at him like, nah, this is not Jackpot, and went off with it very, very well. Voltron, another one. Voltron. How many revamp did Voltron went through? A
They only
couple.
had 2, actually. Voltron
Voltron,
only has 2, bro.
yeah,
really?
just 2. Yeah.
2 or 3?
2.
Well, they did that. Well, again, it was, and keep in mind, it was 2 separate series that weren't even related to one another. Voltron is
Yeah, you're
an
right. You're right.
American product. Okay,
Okay.
Voltron. There is no, again, U.S. made the Voltron brand.
Iconic. Yeah, I give you that argument. You are correct on
Not
that
even
part. We had that
iconic. I mean,
conversation.
again, they weren't even called Voltron in the 2 Japanese series that it was based on. They didn't refer to it
It
as
was called Go
Voltron then.
Lion. It was called Go
Go
Lion. And Go
Line, and I
Lion, the
forget what the
name,
second one was. It was the Sierra Land team or whatever. They didn't. There
it
was
didn't
no
go. It didn't go
Voltron.
too well.
There was no
So
Voltron.
when they named it Voltron, you made it iconic. You are correct. I had to give you that. But still, all these big name cartoon that reigned, I can't say reigned supreme, but what heavy doing in the '80s were given a chance to do a remaster, a revamp. And Math was kind of like among them, but no one touched it. And when you were saying your opening monologue, that the people who were behind the scene writing the script, creating the character, they could have done more with it. I want to know if they have something to do with the IP, whereby whoever had the IP didn't want to redo it again, or they felt like that's the end of it. If you ask me, because I remember Jeremiah said something about some of these IP have some legal ramifications whereby they're not even allowed to either borrow or redo it, or somebody felt like this is my power. I don't want nobody to touch it again. Some kind of thing. I don't know. That could be the case, but this thing deserves to give it another shot because anyone who watched it, you cannot lie to me back in the day if you're watching Mac, you wouldn't make it your own and you're going to school and you're in elementary school say this is my Mac and you claim this it had this special feature because that was a thing. It had an impact in the 80s. Just like Voltron, just like Transformers, just like G.I. Joe. Even Ninja Turtle got multiple revamps. Like, come on. Like, you serious? I believe if you want
And you have a good point there, David. You have a very good point. I'm not going to
if
deny
you were
that
to
one
do a
bit.
poll
Like,
and have every content creator who talk about the 80 cartoon animated, you know what? Let's have a general poll and see how well Mac really have an impact. Just like I'm sure it'll be up there. But why it never got
there are
a
so
rematch?
many cartoons from the 80s. There are only, like, I would say, a handful that are iconic. Voltron, He-Man, and so on. Remember, like you hear a theme song. Oh, I know what that is. Mask is one of those cartoons. Like, if you know it, you know it. If you don't, like, you might look, what the fuck this is. Saber
Wow.
Rider is another one.
No,
Like,
Saber
there's
Rider. Saber Rider was conflicting because there were so many Western-like cartoons that were popping out.
Brave
That would
Star.
have competed with Saber Rider.
We have Brave
I
Star, for
love the
example.
cartoon. I love the
I
cartoon,
did
but
too. So one of my favorites.
Saber Rider was no different from Showhawk, the Western theme.
Yeah. I'm not denying that one bit where you're saying, David. What I'm saying to you right now is you had a lot of cartoons that went under the radar back then. Paul, jump in when you're ready. What do you think?
No, well, I think it was just too many. Like I said, I mean, think about it. You're in at the time. I'm in high school. You guys are obviously were younger, so you probably had more TV time. I didn't.
Agreed.
I mean, I'm racing to get to school in the morning. So what was on in the mornings? You had I don't know, Josie and the Pussycats or whatever it was in the morning that I would watch before school. And then when I came home, I might have had maybe an hour because again, I had basketball practice after school, and then I had or
True.
some project or something else to do. So again, I got maybe about an hour at least until prime time, 9, 10, or whatever. I'm watching the Cosby Show. I'm watching this or that or whatever. So if you want to talk about that afternoon cartoon period for between 2 and 5,
That's what I was
I
about to
don't
mention. That
have like unlike my freshman, sophomore, and years, I don't have 3 hours a day to be watching cartoons. And like I said, back then you didn't have VCR. VCRs were just becoming, uh, uh, um,
I think.
hitting mass, critical mass, where every household had one. A year before, it was a luxury to have a VCR, just like in the mid 70s, it was a luxury to have a color television. And
uh-huh.
again, you could only record certain shows. You had one tape. And so your mother would record her soap operas in the afternoon, and then you would record something in the middle, and then at night, one tape. So again, we get spoiled on the availability
DVR stuff.
right, the ability to record this stuff. And so you got to be careful with. So again, I didn't have the time, but again, the fact that you had all these cartoons that we talked about before, um, you got to pick some. So again, Transformers and GI Joe, they kind of got out the date early because GI Joe came out in 82, 83, Transformers 84. Then you had again Thundercats, and so they were like, if I had to go out of all the cartoons of that period, if you're going to say, well, what are my go-tos? It's probably going to be those. And so,
And
I Like I said, in other words, it was not unique enough to get my interest to where I'm going to forego these. Because, like I said, I got about an hour a day. That's all I got. And so yeah. So I think, everybody was flooding the market. Everyone was selling toys, and that's just the stuff that we're into. What about all those the shows geared to the females? What happened to Jim? Right? Remember Jim came out. Remember My Little Pony was out. Now you guys can laugh at that stuff. You can laugh, but that stuff was there. The Ewoks was out. What else came out? I'm just looking at all these shows that came out in
Now,
1985. The
now
Bernstein
while Mr.
Bears.
Bennett is calling out the list, let me break down the thing. There were 2 to 3 channels we can watch this thing. Monday through Friday was either on WPIX 11
Correct.
and
Or
Fox 5.
WNEW Fox 5.
Pretty much.
And that's where
Three,
He-Man,
it's like 3
He-Man
to
Thundercats,
5.
all that was on Channel 5.
On weekend, it's 3 channels. With
Yes.
Fox 5, with Channel 7 Saturday morning,
And Channel 2 Saturday
WPIX
morning.
11. That on the
Channel
East
2
Coast.
and Channel 4,
Sure.
NBC, Channel 4 Saturday morning. You had
Oh,
the three networks
that
had
was true,
shows on Saturday morning.
Now, true. But on the Central and West Coast, I'm not sure what the channel was, and I found out certain cartoon was set on certain region. That was the trick behind it, but I didn't know about it because I grew up in the East Coast. And when you mentioned Jam, now all these cartoons was fighting for a slot on weekend a lot, because you're talking about the first cartoon aired around 7:30, 8 o'clock, all the way to 12 noon, 1 o'clock, right? Or either on Fox 5 or WPX 11 on Channel 7. Now, when that time hit on Channel 7, sport come in. The young sport writing style, whatever you want to call it, that was the thing they were doing back then on Channel 7. Before you have all the regular sport come in. On Channel 11, if I remember correctly, you got Star Search was on Channel 11 or Channel 5? I don't remember that.
Channel 5, Star Search, yeah.
Channel 5, see?
That was Sunday night. That was Sunday evening.
So imagine what was going on a weekday. And early morning, there's no way you can watch cartoon early morning because unless you are a toddler, which I understand. But early morning is on 7:30. You're on your way to school. By the time you can get back home on 2:33, that hit before they first start line out the cartoon. That's what the deal. And I'm glad you mentioned these things. When the cable came to existence, when the cable came in, like around early 90s?
No, cable came out mid 80s. Yeah, definitely mid 80s with the cable. But again, when Nickelodeon came actually it was like the early 80s. Nickelodeon came out like 82, 83, if I'm not mistaken. So you had Nickelodeon, and you had that, and then they had their afternoon suite of things, and then you also had USA Network, Cartoon Express on USA Network.
Thank you.
That played a lot of the old cartoons, a lot of the OG stuff, Space Ghost, and all those shows that used to come on back from the 60s and whatnot. The old Space Ghost, Johnny Quest, all that came on USA Cartoon Express. So again, it said it was now cable gets into it. So you got Nickelodeon, you got USA Network, you got I'm talking about daily. I'm talking Monday through Friday. I'm not even talking about the weekend stuff, because you had 2, 4, and 7 for the weekend stuff. But again, as a kid, you got and again, not only as a kid, but also your age. Like I said, as a teenager, again, I'm starting to kind of fade away a little bit. As a teenager, you're watching the party dance shows. Because you used to have not like American Bandstand, but I'm saying you had these shows that would come on in the afternoon. You had girls dancing on TV. I'm sorry, I'd rather watch girls dancing in their mini skirts on Rock USA or whatever to whatever was hitting in 1985. Prince, Let's Go Crazy or
American
something.
Bandstand.
But that was Saturday. I'm still doing the week, Monday through Friday. I'm saying you had shows on in the afternoon that dealt with the music. Rap was coming up. You had you didn't have like MTV. MTV wasn't even into rap at that point. I think Music Box came like in the late 80s. MTV
We about
Yo
was, we
MTV
about was
Raps
on
came out
channel.
in
Was
the
it
late
channel
80s.
55? Some weird
Yes, that's what I'm
channel
saying. Yeah,
that
you had right. So we were watching rap videos. We were watching or the music video shows that were on. We were watching the dancing shows that would come on in the afternoon. And say cartoons became less and less of a space unless it was, like I said, maybe Saturday morning. You may watch some stuff, and even then, Dance Party USA. Thank you, Eric. Dance Party USA. That was one that used to come on local, both in Philly. Certainly, Philly stations had it. Channel 29, Philadelphia, Channel 17, Philadelphia used to have that. We were so again, me being a little bit older at that time. I'm 16, so yeah, my priorities are starting to change just a little bit when it came to viewership. So again, if I was going to watch a cartoon, it had to hold my interest. And keep in mind, I'm still trying to keep a space for the stuff that I grew up on. So like Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner and all those are the Warner Brothers cartoons. I'm still trying to keep us. Remember on Channel 7 on Saturday mornings, you had the Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck show, which was so they were looping that in. So I'm still watching those. So again, and then you had all the action cartoons. You had again the Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man and his amazing friends. You had Thundar the Barbarian. You had all these shows that were coming on Saturday that I'm trying to have a spot for. So again, this show in particular, like I said, from what I saw, I liked it. I could have rocked with it, but again, I got limited time and limited interest. And so how am I going to make another spot to slice in to spend 30 minutes watching the show, especially if it's conflicting with another show? Because that's the thing. You couldn't watch. We didn't have simultaneous streams. So if Fox 5 had a show on and PIX had a show on, somebody's getting missed. But all I knew is for a while, it was Transformers at 3, G.I. Joe at 3:30, Voltron at 4. That was it. I mean, anything that's going to compete with that, unless the those shows were like in reruns, because like I said, you typically get like 26 episodes a season or whatever. And so, okay, well, I saw that already. Yeah, now I'm going to switch over to Fox and I'm going to watch He-Man, or I'm going to watch the Thundercats, or I'm going to watch something else. But we just didn't have the luxury. You had one TV, or maybe a couple TVs in the house. You didn't have where I could just watch my phone and just watch all these shows and stuff. Yeah, who had control of the TV? And if my dad wanted the TV, there's nothing I could do about it.
That's the same
That's
here. If
it.
dad want to watch sport, no one can say anything. Now, if dad's not around, dad is at work, and mom doing Monday through Friday soap opera. When mom put it on soap opera, do not touch the remote control. Do not change that dial. Or you get a ponytail belt behind your head, or that slipper coming in with a woofing sound.
Mm-hmm.
You know what that means? So we get it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about it, because I just felt the way that even though it had a jacked up lineup during the 80s, I'm not gonna lie, that was a boom for a lot of creativities.
It was, yeah.
And the way they were being so creative about it, some of these cartoons / anime were original, while there was others with nothing more copycat of another one. It was kind of like, if you were a kid, you can't say that you didn't pick up on it, but you did, but you kind of like brush it off, so to speak. But just that M.A.S.K was one of the original, just like Voltron, just like G.I. Joe, just like Ninja. They were the original iconic cartoon that could have been redone over it. But as time progressed, when you entered the 90s and 2000s, you see a revamp of Transformers coming out of nowhere. Okay. He-Man, there were multiple adaptations of He-Man. There was one that was weird, whereby He-Man was a little bit slimmer, but kind of futuristic He-Man. And I was like, what the hell is this? Someone trying to put a futuristic twist to him. That's what you brought him in Back in the Future kind of thing. And I'm like, not sure, not gonna work. Transformer, it was going from one adaptation to another adaptation to another adaptation. It was still going on strong. Voltron, a few out of, but wasn't as many. Some of the big names that was in the 80s found their way back in the 90s and 2000 and so on and so forth. But while they were going on, I'm sure people were saying like, wait, Matt should have been among them because Matt was not crappy, but it did stand up. I can't remember how many episodes it had, but it was really good.
It had seven.
What
It
I
had
was finding
again. It
strange
had
was that-
75 episodes.
How many?
There were 75 episodes, but 65 in 1 year, one season. The season 2 was only 10 episodes. And again, that's crazy. Whoever made that
That's a
decision,
lot.
I'm thinking that's crazy. So I mean, in a
Now,
way, you
if
kind
you were
of. So again, I
to-
think that was some executives who were like, we need to capitalize on this marketing thing. We got to sell a bunch of toys, put out as much as possible. Whoever did that has no idea how television works, has no idea how reruns work, has no idea how a television season works.
and
You killed the
and I give you that
series,
because
and
no, you're
Go
right
ahead.
because we did have the thing. You have the same argument with Voltron. We had the same argument with G.I. Joe and other. It's like at that time it was something new to a lot of the people, and there was a competition going on.
yeah,
Like
it's
man
like,
just
oh,
saying that
go after hot. That's executives. They're like, go after the hot. That's selling. Cars transforming cars that sells. Boom, go.
and hit it. Man just said that era was just the platform just to maximize the toy sale because it was a toy competition with a toy galore. Let's be real, Toys R Us was a huge juggernaut.
Yeah,
Because almost every cartoon that showed up on TV, there was a toy model of it in the store. Now, based on the popularity on that store of that toy, it determined if they get a regular small shelf section or a wide one, or the one section on just for it alone. That's how it was, and that's how the American industry or the toy business blew up.
yeah,
Let's be real, because you know how you were talking about it before. How kids were like, "Mommy, Daddy, I want to get this." That's exactly how you can say America was making the economical boom with a massive toy sale.
yeah. Let me just address a couple chat comments. So again, shout out to Demonte Green Beans. Thank you for joining the show tonight. So yes, that was the Mask show. It had 75 plus episodes over 2 seasons. Season 1 was 65 episodes. Season 2 was only 10 episodes. And in season 2, they went totally away from the format of the first season. They went to this auto racing type of dynamic in season 2. Again, made no sense in terms of how that came out with. And Eric, as far as He-Man, as far as the retooling for Conan, yeah, I'm thinking that might have been some copyright stuff. Because again, around that same time, well, maybe a couple years earlier, yeah, Conan the movie came out, and then everybody. So again, Thundar the Barbarian is basically Conan, again another retooling, and He-Man is yet another version of that. So again, barbarians were in at the time, not to mention all the movies that were around, either some sort of sword. Again, remember the movie Yor that came out? Remember Beastmaster that also came out in 1983? And then, which I know Eric didn't like too much, but I liked it, Beastmaster. But again, everybody was coming out with a Conan type of film with this muscular guy in loincloth. Or like I said, you had the robots, you had the Transformers or something like that, something with cars or trying to sell something. Everybody was sort of jumping on that bandwagon, certainly back in. So I'm thinking the whole thing with He-Man, yeah, obviously Conan the Barbarian, I'm sure, was an inspiration for that. But due to copyright and everything else, why they didn't come out with a Conan cartoon? And maybe partly because Conan was a R-rated film. So you're talking about trying to sell to kids if they know if they said, "Daddy, what's Conan?" Oh,
And hit a joke though.
That could be a
Even
difficult
though-
conversation because you don't
but
want to
here's
see
the joke.
naked ladies and sex and heads getting cut off. Yeah, I don't think
But here's
that's
the joke.
that's going to market well to kids and children.
They find their way into the gaming industry. Same Conan that they had a problem making a cartoon for, they're able to make a video game for it. Like afterward, I was like, really? So you realize now there was a lot more money you can. And the thing is, everything's all about money in the American industry. If you think about it, toy sale with money. How much can capitalize? Yes, this IP battle of intellectual property is still in. Yeah, that was one thing, but at the same time, when people find an idea that you wouldn't capitalize and they wouldn't capitalize on it, it's still a lot.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what the thing. It's all about capitalism. How much can you bleed out of that particular idea?
Yeah.
Now, Max.
And again, like I said, saturation. I just said Conan was saturated. All these toy lines were saturated. He said GoBots, robotics. That
GoBot. No,
yeah.
I argue with somebody in high school. GoBot was the lame. I'll say GoBot is the lame version of Transformer. Even though they're almost at around the same time, but they're about GoBot animation. GoBot animation wasn't that so convincing.
Right.
It was kind of like I don't understand me, toddler-ish. It was like a cartoon for toddlers. The way the animation was looking. And when Transformer came to play, it kind of like pushed GoBot out the door. Like this is not your play. GoBot only had one season and one shot, and it didn't make it. They were losing a lot of their rating to Transformer, and that was the end of it. It was that. Now Max, there was no competition for Max. There was nothing similar to what Max was doing. Now, but here's the joke though. Here's the joke though, because when you look at the name of Masks, the name seemed kind of lame. We're gonna talk about it right now.
Well, both of them, M.A.S.K and V.E.N.O.M.
Right? Oh God, Mac! I saw that. Mac mean Mobile Armor Strike Command with a K. I'm like, really?
With a K, and then V.E.N.O.M. was
and
that
Virtual Evil Network of Mayhem. I'm like, no. I'm sorry, guys. If you in the 80s,
very creative names. And again, do you think they might have said, okay, Venom, Cobra, could you have been a little bit more creative than that? The bad guys, snakes and stuff like that. We're gonna that worked for G.I. Joe. So we're gonna borrow off the name them. Yeah, we can't use Cobra. Cobra's probably copyright. We can't use Cobra, so let's use Venom instead. Yeah,
I won't be surprised that was the thing was going on, because here's the thing: why the American industry in cartoon was copy each other in some ways, shipping form, and don't worry about copyright. Across the water, the Japan animation industry didn't even care. When you copy someone, it's like an homage. You're saying showing respect, because that culture was different. No matter how that played out over there compared to here. Don't mention Dungeons and Dragons right now, because I have a beef with that cartoon. Maybe I'll talk about it another time, Demonte. You're bringing out some closet issues.
I didn't see it.
I watched Dungeons and Dragons show on Saturday. I think it was on ABC or CBS. Wasn't sure. Wasn't on network, but still, compared to M.A.S.K, I'm not gonna lie. The full name of it, we was making fun of it though in school. We were, because we trying to figure out where did this idea come from. And even though it was a weird name, but when you squeeze it onto this Max, it kind of seemed cool. As long as you don't call it the whole name. Venom, well, it was suspicious by the naming convention, but still, the toy line was cool, the vehicle was cool, the concept was unique. Because let's be real, we talk about Transformers, we talk about Jet, everything thought of this from a toy before it had a storyline. And I believe there was the same thing applied to this M.A.S.K. But still, all these other ones were given a second or third or fourth or fifth chance. Later as the year passed by, to get a better writer block, to write better script. So I'm thinking, how come M.A.S.K was not given the same chance like all the other big names? Not every big name had a second gen. We were aware of that. Not every single one of them. Dwayne started to get another chance. Shebra didn't get a stable chance. It was like there was a lot of cool cartoon that could have been like now Eric Inspector Gadget. That one. I don't know how that one got a couple of adaptation again after that.
Mhm.
Inspector Gadget came back again more like CGI at one point. And I believe Matt was better than that. But somehow Inspector Gadget get a second or third chance. Which is weird. Because I think we might have to do this with pop culture one day and that corner some of these cartoons that slip through the crack. They get a second or third or fourth. What they did with it, what were the conversation behind that? I think that's the only one we visit because when I look at this one, I'm telling you, y'all can Google this. Look at all the big name cartoons in the air. It was a lot across the coast.
Yeah.
Look at what showed up on the East Coast, what showed up on Central, what showed up on the West Coast. What was considered more popular, what was more debate about. It was a lot. And most were all based on toy sale or toy motivation sale because I'm not gonna lie, Toy the Ones was the king. It wasn't Toy with another 2 or 3 other competitions more toy store that was trying
Not
to
big ones. No big. You had your
wasn't that
local.
big.
You had your local store, toy stores. I remember when I was growing up, I was in Elizabeth. They had Coklers. That was like a local toy store that was kind of big, So you had some of those, but then the big giant, the Walmart of the day was Toys R Us. Yeah, for sure.
Bingo. And that thing, and Toy Story was like a long, ongoing, successful business until they had some financial issue and they had to go bankrupt and shut down.
Well, plus all online. I mean, online, like a lot of stores kind of start to do that.
It was online, but then it was a brick and mortar store at first. They had multiple store located. Then when it went online, but still, as it went online, it still had severe financial issues. It was all based on mismanagement of the money. And a lot of the employees was not getting paid. Because you might have to do a story about that. The rise and forward on Twitter, what caused it to fall, why such an iconic store that a lot of kids grew up on, dragging their parents, indirectly abusing their parents' wallet. Hello.
Yeah, but again, tech. I think phones and tab. I mean, because again, a lot of you used to go to the toy store and say, "Give me a game, give me a puzzle game or something like that." Well, guess what? When Temple Run was out or whatever it was, or so again, who needs to go and buy electronic games or puzzle games because everything is right there.
I think Temple Run was the most iconic mobile game that beat every other game, even up to now, when it comes to sell and download, because what the hell was that? That was the phone that people were able to enjoy you because you don't have to swipe either. And you watch people doing this in the subway, like, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
Just look about it.
But I think I think just gaming overall. I mean, I think kids, especially younger kids, they video games I think took over. Like to actual have like a handheld game. A battery's not included. That was like a thing of the 80s, right? Battery's not included. So so again, all those games became when Game Boys came out. So all you needed was the game. Like the Toys R Us, I remember in the 80s, me and Eric would go to Toys R Us to buy games. You had a section with a game, and they didn't even have the game. It was just a card that you would get. You would take the card up to the front and then buy, and then they would go in the back and get the game and come out. Again, gaming became a bigger part of what kids wanted. But again, actual toys, I think all of that fell off. Come the 90s when video games started to get portable. So electronics overall killed, I think, a lot of the toy gaming industry. Yeah, girls, they may want to play with dolls or whatever, or guys want their action figures. But more times than not, a lot would rather have a video game in their hand versus an action toy. Because again, also with toys, if you really have fun, you need friends who they got to get the same toys with you. And certainly when the internet became a thing where you can start gaming with people across the world, then who needs to do that? So, but let's get back to the series itself. I mean,
Now,
obviously, like I said, the
and
series
now
came
while
out
you
and
were talking, I look into it. I'm like, would it any opportunity for a revamp, right? And I'm trying to find out IDW Publishing revived Mac into a comic book back in 2016 as
yeah,
part of Hardball comic universe, right? In
right,
other words, Hardball have IP right over this. And they not only on the right, they were afloat of the idea of a live action film.
yeah,
But for some reason, nothing happened.
hmm
This is
yeah.
what I'm
I
trying
don't
to
know.
point
It
out.
wasn't. I don't think it was popular enough. Like I said, it wasn't doing its run. It had a short run. It didn't garner the national interest the way Transformers and GI Joe did. And I don't think it had a film. It might have had like it was almost like one of those cult classic shows. Like it might have had a cult following, but
Mm-hmm.
typically cult followings don't get movies or don't get revamps.
That's true. That's true.
So again,
That's
but
true.
let's deal with the show itself. What did you like about the show? What you didn't like about the show? Let's deal with this. So again, so obviously you have this organization um that was basically going against, against Venom, Mask against Venom. So they were kind of like an not a terrorist organization. They kind of unlike Cobra. They were basically, just trying to extort as much money as they could, using the
Mm-hmm.
technology that they had. But it was basically it was the same kind of theme every week. It was always a different plot. Venom was up to something. Mask had to come in and try to and stop and foil their plans. Venom would always get away. And then you had another show. In fact, in this case, you literally had a brand new show every week, in fact, more, because again, they had so
Mm-hmm.
many shows within the first season. But what did you like
And
about the show? What did you like about the show? What didn't you like about the show?
to me, I liked about it with the concept behind it because, for one, looking at the landscape of all the cartoons, like anime that came out in the 80s, that one's more original in a way. You had the robot competition between Transformer and Gobot was going on.
Mm-hmm.
You have Voltron. You have Thundercat. All these ones would almost look like a copy from one another in a way, if that's
Mm-hmm.
not the case. But
Mm-hmm.
Matt with a very original idea whereby, yeah, it was two opposing organizations with some weird names, which is funny, don't get me wrong. But the fact that they were able to put on a particular Mac was like a helmet
Yeah.
that unlock hidden features of the vehicle that was driving. Now, looking at the vehicle lineup, right, you had a Thunderhawk with a red Chevy Camaro
Yes.
with gill wing doors that turn into wings that actually
That
fly.
could
That was
actually
a cool
fly. Yes.
concept.
Yeah.
You
Mm-hmm.
had a Condor with a motorcycle that turned into a helicopter.
Correct.
That was a cool idea. You had the Firecracker with a pickup truck with spring-loaded features,
Mm-hmm.
which is a cool idea. You had a tracker trailer rig loaded with weapons. Now, the thing I was looking at, like, I said, you know what? If you were to do a revamp, you could expand on the lineup of different cars or the
Mm-hmm.
feature, like have a proper rider block where I work on. That was the good guys. The
Mm-hmm.
bad guy, you had Switchblade with a helicopter that turned to a jet.
Yep.
Now, that one is almost as if it took an idea from Transformer, but at the time they didn't. I'm a nerdy ass guy. I looked at it. I thought that was a cool idea. You're applying a motorcycle that detachable sidecar turned to a submarine. Okay, fine. You got a jackhammer, you got an outlaw, and there's more. But then these were vehicles that they have a convert mode once you put
Mm-hmm.
on the helmet that give you that unlock feature. And I was thinking, what if you have a good writing block? Because I've taken this storyline and expound on it even much further. We could have something very interesting because the first season was only about crime fighting and action
Correct.
adventure. The second one, you were correct, was racing thing.
Yeah.
Now,
I like total. Yeah. I mean,
that's to show that there was not a good writing block under that wing.
But there was, see, that's my thing. There was the fact that you churned out 65 episodes in a season shows that you had decent writing. That should
Yeah,
have been a
decent.
3-year show in and of it. Just you could have
But
took
the
the
thing that,
first season and made 3 seasons out of it.
but remember when you had this comment about how the writer block don't go along with the executive because maybe they have a solid idea they could make the thing go longer, but the exec thing they have a better idea than the writer themselves, and then when you have a conflict whereby the writer want to go one direction, but the exec say no, let's go this direction because the writer believe that if we go this direction, it will work, but the exec say no, let's try this, and when they did, and they sank it.
Yeah. But again, I can't get away from the first season though. I mean, that's you
It's a
had
lot.
material, you could have stretched it out. And I just can't
And I think that's the problem because how I would have put it. I have a feeling that throughout the 80s, a lot of these writers came straight out from college who had ideas or writing a script for a show. And the amount of pressure you get put on just to write a script. I'm not gonna lie, script writing is not so easy as people think it is. Oh, you know what? No. It's not that simple. And I believe is that these people were put in a confine whereby they were given enough time to map it out. What was the biggest issue during the 80s? We all know what the issue when it comes to cartoon. Character creation. How to build out the character first. And you have a inside story or origin story. This way you can able to create something around that. I don't think that was the case. But they're able to make, you say 65 one season?
Yeah.
I mean you had a lot going for it. They could have you correct. I have to agree with you on this part because when you break it down that way, you hit 65. In present time, that's about what?
These days that's 6 seasons because these days a season could be 10 episodes
or 12
or 12. Yeah. So that's 5, 6 seasons. So, and like I said, the sad part, they could have rolled out the Transformers G.I. Joe way because again, after 1986, it was over.
And you were right. You are right. And this is why I said what I said because something was weird about all this going on because as time progressed and you start listening to the people from the Comic-Con interview and talk about they going through a writer block issue, they're trying to write a next script and they get lost in the idea like where to go and where to get the inspiration from. I believe the people who were put in charge to write the script for this show had an original idea they wanted to go with, but they were forced not to go with it. But if you have to get 65 episodes for one season,
I never heard of that ever. That's the first time I can't believe it. I can't believe it. But let me talk about what I liked about the show. So I liked because you talked about the helmets. Not only did the helmets control the cars or allow them to transform, the helmets themselves had different powers. When they were out of their cars, when they were doing certain things, so one would give them mental or abilities or shoot lasers or do certain things or whatever. So the helmets were powerful in themselves, and I like the sequence what they did when they met up. So I think a lot of what they also borrowed on was Mission Impossible, because when you think about it, the whole idea is okay. So there's a problem. Okay, so Trakker went to his AI at the time and said, okay, who's the best team? And every show, well, not every show, but generally it would be different characters based on the situation. There was probably about 6 or 7 characters throughout M.A.S.K that could be called upon, but on any given show, they took like 3 or 4 of the rotation. So, and it was pretty diverse. You had a woman, you had a black guy, you had an Asian guy. Although when I look at it today, I think we're in different times now, because I think the stereotypes of Asians on the show. Remember the Asian guy on the show who was in most of the episodes that I saw. The Asian guy was always called up because I guess he was very smart. But But again, the way they made him was he always had some saying that came out of a fortune cookie, and everybody was like, "What does he mean by that?" So it's like a bird in the tree is better than two. And then they'd be like, "What are you talking?" And then Track would have to just. But again, it's like, I mean, real. Like I look at it now, right? I'm like, seriously. I mean, this
But
is
it wasn't the only
this
one.
is what
There were many other shows when they had an Asian character and they put that
the
type of
same thing.
thing.
He sounded Asian. He had to. He sound. If he didn't sound like Key Luke, he sounded like some Asian stereotype of how an Asian person talks. But again, this guy's like every
Or Mr.
episode you had
Miyagi.
to
The most
have.
common one, the Mr. Miyagi sound. They would
Yeah,
make it sound like he give you some widow and you just like, huh?
it's like ancient Chinese secret. I mean, constant. I'm like, really, guys? I mean, I know it's 40 years ago. I get it, right? But I'm like, you look at it with 40 years later. It's like, man, this wouldn't have. I don't think people would have embraced this characterization in
No be scary.
2025
No be
today.
scary. You have a bunch of Chinese content creator do a show about all the 80 cartoon that they stereotyping Chinese character, and they
Oh
look at each one. They were like, really? Do they think we sound like that? Like
yeah,
it,
yeah.
it
It's
was,
like
it was not only that. They did the same to with African character. The way they make
yeah,
African characters in some cartoon, you start to wonder like seriously, what were you, Captain Planet?
yeah. And then you had your southern drawl type of guy, like talk like cowboy, like we gotta do this. And so you had that. You had the Asian guy. You had the brother. And then you had the grammatically correct white guys. So again, I guess that was their shot at diversity. I guess back then. But
It was
again,
too heavy on it. It was too heavy
yeah, yeah.
on the sauce. And
But I
you
like,
kind
but I
of
like the whole idea, like Mission Impossible. The old, I'm talking about the '60s show now. I'm not talking about the Tom Cruise. The old '60s show. Jim will get his team together. He go through the profile and be like, okay, I need this guy. I need Garrett Morris because he can crack into any safe or whatever. I need this guy. He's a master of disguises. I need this guy or this girl because she can do certain things. He would assemble the team together. They would kind of go where what the mission was or whatever. They would power up their helmets and then they would go and do their mission. So
and
I
that what
liked,
made the cartoon different because
yes, I liked
every
I
task
liked that
was a
concept of it
requirement.
for sure. Now, what I didn't like, obviously, because it is a quote unquote kids show, they have to have his son and the robot. I mean, everybody was just like Battle of the Planets did, bringing in Seven Zarg Seven and whatnot. You got to have the kid and the funny robot sidekick for laughs. Maybe they were still barring off the Star Wars thing. You need an R2 or C3PO or something. So again, that I thought was
That was an annoying thing all across the
yeah, but
board.
it's kid again. They do it with every cause the only one that went away with that was Transformers and G.I. Joe. You didn't have kids in there, whatever. Although you did have Spike, but he was like a teenage, he was like a young man at the time. So it wasn't silly. It wasn't meant to be silly, but I thought given the serious of the missions, and then but you had to throw that in for comic relief and get the young kids involved. So I thought that was, but again, it's interesting. They did away with that in season 2, but they changed the whole direction of the show so much it didn't matter if you had the kid there or not because again they went so far off. But I thought the challenges, I thought the storylines themselves, every episode I watched, I liked at least season 1. So again, I think, definitely I thought it was a decent show. It combined elements of Transformers, of like I said, Mission Impossible, of G.I. Joe. So I think all those things were there in a way that kept it interesting. So I would have no problem watching more episodes of the show. Like I said, you go on YouTube right now, look up M.A.S.K full episodes. There's a playlist that got every episode, all 75. You can watch them in order and knock yourself out. The only other thing that what also kills the show is again, all these shows were formulaic, right? Transformers was formulaic. G.I. Joe is like, yeah, Cobra's doing a plot. G.I. Joe has to stop him. Transformers, Decepticons have a plot. The Autobots have to stop them here. Venom has a plot. M.A.S.K has to stop. And I think that if you give too much, again, they always say in entertainment, you want to leave the audience wanting more. But if you dump everything out within one season, you don't give people a chance to appreciate the product or forget. It's like, oh, it's the same thing every week. And like I said, M.A.S.K never captured Venom. Like, unlike none of these shows ever do. Just like, G.I. Joe never captured Cobra Commander. And obviously Megatron didn't have defeat in transfer until the movie where he transformed into Galvatron. So again, I get there's a formula to it, but again, you got to let people let it savor a little bit.
Yeah, and I say this to be honest, what you point out there was totally absolutely correct because it wasn't only Mac that was doing that. We have like so many episodes in one season. There was many other cartoons that were forced in that same dynamic because it was a new market.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a race to who will succeed with a toy sale.
Yeah.
Now, when you see all the later adaptations, some of these ones every come back, they reduced the amount of episodes they have for each season and became much, much more than it was because they realized they got so much material. Talk about 30 minutes an episode.
Stay on topic, Eric.
No, the thing. You can't, no, I'm saying, you do 30 minutes on an episode.
Yeah.
And the way when I looked at it, like, if someone wanted to take this project and we do it again, how will you look through all the old episodes and say, you know what, we need to do a proper breakdown. Let's do a proper introduction for this cartoon. Let's do it justice. Whereby the first 10 or 20 episodes is like an origin story on how they started up, right? How they came about and why they were picked for the team.
Yeah.
This way you get depth into it. You don't just, okay, this the team and just like that because maybe with the first 10 episodes or so, you know who what. You give it a character introduction, their pro, their con, their strength, their weakness. You get to understand who are these characters so you give your audience a chance to like whatever character that fit their criteria. I believe that would have been the best thing for it. Then from there, you start to build out the storyline and the plot.
Yeah,
And
they
the plot
never
sequence.
did I don't think they ever did a storyline, at least from what I was able to watch so far, that went into depth on the characters themselves, except for Trakker, because Trakker, he's the protagonist, he's got a son. So again, you kind of get a little bit of what his world is like on a regular basis. Everybody else is simply a utility. So again, as soon as they
And
get
that's
that
what killed
alert,
it.
yeah, and that's the crazy thing. They get that alert, and it doesn't matter what they're doing. So like one of the guys is like a rock star or something like that. He could be doing a live show, playing with all their band members. He gets to watch thing. He leaves the stage. Like it's like wait a minute. We're in the middle of a concert and you decide to leave at the last minute. Or you got a guy who's in school, the brother who's a school teacher of some kind. He's in the middle of class. He's like, I gotta go. That was
Now,
funny to me.
no offense. Me stop you there. Ain't no way a school teacher leave the school during school section going on. You had to have it.
Yeah. So it's like
It's almost impossible. So
Yeah.
that would kind of killed it right there. That was like, you serious, right?
But again, I'm
You
looking
telling
at,
me-
I'm looking at it with we're looking at this through grown man eyes here. So again, I get it. I gotta put myself, because I wasn't asking myself, from what I remember as a kid, I wasn't asking myself those questions then. I'm just
Nobody
saying,
did.
as an older guy, I'm thinking, yeah, it's kind of
No,
impractical for you to leave your band in the
nobody
middle
did
of a
that,
concert.
Mr. Better. You're not the only one. Everyone who grew up on these cartoons, with year later, we came with 101 questions. Why was this being made? What was the reason behind it? What was the logic behind it? Why it done this way when you could have done a certain way? And that was the thing. But what I was, like I said earlier in the show, the only thing I was mad about, the way Matt came about, all the other big names came about the same exact way, but they were given second, third, or fourth chances, whereby they got a remaster, reproduction, and this time it brought in extra depth. The thing is, what you said earlier, it was a combination of different ideas under this cartoon. It wasn't like it was copying, but it was taking a piece, put it together, and make something unique. Now,
Right.
that's what I said. If someone were to take this project, whoever watching this show, and you're thinking about really doing a revamp, you need to have a proper writer boy who would, I don't care, give them a year to flush out these ideas.
Mhm.
Have like a character map and how you build all these characters.
Yeah.
Because give the credit to the Japanese animator. Before a new cartoon or new anime come out, they give you a character map. Who are the characters? If they had a vehicle or have a mech, they let you know what the mech is like. They let you know this the depth, this how we build the character. So you can get familiar with it.
Mhm.
When it comes to Japanese, you gotta give them credit where credit due. Character creation is key in building
Well, now
professional anime.
the only thing I would make a distinction on, again, this was a toy line first.
Yeah, you're right.
No, so again, they was like basically Hasbro, who was behind the toy line, said basically, we need to sell these toys, build a show around it so we can sell toys.
We were no different from G.I. Joe and
Or
Transformers.
Transformers for that matter. All the Transformers stuff that came later when Marvel Comics came out with a Transformers series or IDC or whatever, when they all came out, that came later. It was so popular that they were able to build a backstory for it. M.A.S.K, I don't think ever had the opportunity to become popular enough to build a decent backstory. Like I said, I know DC Comics, they had a lot, they had a comic series and whatnot, and there were a couple made during that time. But again, how you start is ultimately how you're gonna finish. And because
that's why I
the
believe that.
number one thing was we have to sell toys, forget all that storyline stuff. Because again, also keep in mind what your audience is 8 to 12-year-old kids. How many of them care about storyline? Again, we grown guys, and we're worrying about storyline for a kids cartoon. So again, we gotta be careful with that. You know, we gotta.
I'm glad you mentioned that because here's the joke. While you talking about that, something that came to my mind. There was a movie back in the '80s that there was a guy who came back to life, and he's supposed to be dead, but he came back in some kind of futuristic like black car in a movie called The Rat. He had a dark ass helmet on
Mhm.
to cover his face. Now there was a thing for cool ass helmet.
Mhm.
Now M.A.S.K was no different, but if they could have been done different, because shout out to Power Rangers, they're heavy on the helmet, which is ridiculous, crazy. But I feel like they stole the idea for masks. That's my thing. If you may say I'm wrong, but Power Ranger was helmet heavy. Every season, every new idea of Power Ranger, they're all rocking a helmet.
Correct.
So if that show can go that far with this helmet thing going on, they have it for so long, you can do the same thing with masks. You're gonna have a better writer block,
Yeah.
build a better character map on this thing, give it a better storyline, and do it just the web by one. And almost like a Mission Impossible / Transformer / GI kind of thing going on,
Yeah.
but it's gonna be a little mix or a futuristic or something. I can't say the third or fourth war, but mythical about it. That could be a thing. Because you mentioned before, it's not only they had the helmet to unlock certain features in the car, they also have certain power that go along
Within
with
the
the
helmets
helmet.
themselves, yeah. Yeah.
That could have been done different, because the way I'm looking at it right now, this was a idea, a concept that could have been a diamond mine. But at the time, they were just racing against the clock to beat out the other competition in toy sale. I think this is one of the number one issue with American cartoon back in the '80s, that some of these iconic names didn't come back for a second or third run to see if they can really get a better audience.
Be careful with that.
No, no, when I say better art with another generation, because that generation of the '80s were going up.
I get you, but I got to call you out because, like I said, if you look at all of these Japanese anime cartoons, most of them were 1 or 2 seasons. Voltron, 2 separate series, barely lasted a season.
You're right.
America made Voltron a brand.
You're right.
So again, I know your affinity for anime and that genre and whatnot, but they bomb just as much as the stuff that's over here. Power Rangers wasn't even a successful show in Japan.
It wasn't.
America made Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And I
And
know a
all
lot
this-
of Power Rangers fans, you don't like that. You don't like to hear that, but accept it. Live with it. America made Power Rangers.
You're right.
So you got
But
so again,
they had so many different versions of Power, but they didn't call it by they called it another name.
no, they didn't. That's my point. America, we know how to brand.
I think that's what the issue is. Branding was something America mastered the most.
Yeah.
Other
But also,
countries,
I
other
think the thing with Japan also is you look at, like, even when those shows was out. I mean, just look at for the year, how many anime were out, or the what they call the genre for the robots or the cars or whatever they call that genre. There were so many of them.
That's true.
So again, they were flooding the market with all these shows either, and they didn't go anywhere. So you have an American goes over there and he says, okay, we'll take, give me this, give me that, give me this, give me that, and we'll make it into something. Even you talked about Gotcha Man earlier. Now, Gotcha Man had episodes. Gotcha Man had like 80 episodes. I'll give you that. But the only reason we're talking about Battle of the Planets or Gotcha Man is because Eric doesn't like it. Thank God for Sandy Frank. Sandy Frank went over, bought the property. He was like, look, I'm looking to do a show. You give me, they say, here, take this one. He's the one who made it into something that then people wanted to go back and then look at, oh, I want to see what the original Japanese was. Nobody would even cared about Gotcha Man if Sandy Frank didn't make Battle of the Planets, because Gotcha Man was basically shelved. It was on the reels in the back room, never to be seen again. The cellophane would have gotten oxidized, and nobody would have cared until Sandy Frank went over there and did what he did. So again, I know you guys, especially you guys do an anime show. I get that. I respect that.
Mr. Paul Bennett, your statement and your argument is sounded and it's founded. This is why I said if you have a show to attack what came out in like an 80 pop culture thing and they have you like a historian, you will kill a lot of argument with the history and the fact which you are highly needed, because you're totally correct about it. Because after looking at these things and Eric, like it has 3 series.
Gotcha Man had 3 series. Okay.
Oh boy.
All right, I'll look it up. I'm not invalidating what he's saying, but again, the fact that it had 3 series. All right, I want to know how long. I want to know how much.
Do what I like about Mr. Paul Bennett, because he knows his stock, he knows his history about what was going on in the 80s. This is why if they were to have a pop culture show on this thing and we have Angry Elf,
it had 100. It lasted 2 seasons, 1972 to 1974. Had 105 episodes.
Damn.
I'll give it that. But it still doesn't change my point. In the 1970s and 1980s and 1990s, there wouldn't have been the desire to even know what Gotcha Man was.
That's 7 to 8 seasons.
Yeah. Like I said, back then, I don't understand. They're churning stuff out. And so, like I said, I don't understand why the need to come up. But again, that's Japan. That could be the thing in Japan. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't know if that's just the norm that, okay, a series, literally a season is 52 weeks. I don't know that. I mean, if that's how it works, I just know how American TV works and typically how American syndication works and typically how seasons work. You do 26 is generally a season. And then in the summer months, you simply just replay. September, when the fall came out, that's when your new stuff came out. So I just know about the American product, but generally over there, yeah, they could be churning out a lot of product. But again, 1974, it was over. And I don't know if Japan, do they do reruns the way they do over here? I don't know.
You have a solid argument. And the thing about it, it's like now, it's no longer a rerun because you have all these streaming services whereby they upload it for people if you want to watch it. You can go and watch it. I'm not sure there's a channel that shows rerun of iconic
Yeah,
anime.
I don't get Japanese TV. I would probably say no because again, if you're going to come out with that many series, when you're going to have time, like, and this is the 70s again. Yes, there's a different country. You don't have 5 TVs in a house. I doubt it. You didn't have they probably invented the VCR first, but you didn't have, you weren't going to stream everything. So again, where were you going to see this stuff? And again, and in Japan, if your Japanese dad wanted the TV, nobody was watching TV. If he wanted to watch the game show, the variety show, the soap, whatever it was, sorry kids, go read a book or do your homework or something like that. No, you're not going to watch Japanese anime or manga or whatever it is, kaiju or whatever. You're not going to be watching that. No,
once again,
go read a book.
There was no way around that part.
You know what I'm saying? So it's not like these guys had. Where were you going to see all these reruns of all these shows? Gotcha Man, for all intents and purposes, died in 1974. It was over. America made it popular, which is why they brought it back.
And I have to agree with you, and I'm not arguing with you on that because, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you right now, if it comes to this type of intellectual debate, when it comes to history and fact about certain show, I don't think anybody want to compete with Mr. Bennett anymore right now because he's calling out everything for what it is.
I'm just saying, like I said, listen. I love all of it. I love the Japanese stuff. I love them. You know, for the most part, I could be critical of the American stuff. I just like to level set because I know people get very passionate about their anime or their old school cartoons or whatever it is.
Attached to their childhood. This is attached to their upbringing. Because you said it yourself. By the time all these things were coming to you, only in high school, we were just elementary school, so we had the free time.
Yeah, you had a lot more free time.
Now, when we got to the freshman year of high school, this is where the division being played.
Right.
Either you were a cool jock or you were trying to get the girl, so you stopped watching cartoon because I hate to say that during that time in America, ladies and gentlemen, if you're in the 9th grade and you're watching cartoon, you get picked on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, definitely by high school. Now, again, all of us, the fact we all grew up together, yeah, we would be on the bus going to the basketball game, talking about the Transformers. We would, because again, we all grew up watching Transformers, so we appreciated that. But I'm talking about if you're again junior, senior year in high school, what you doing after school or whatever. If you're not on a sports team or not on some. I don't care if you're on drama, glee club. I don't care what it was. You were, again, doing something or you weren't working. Because, again, when I was in high school, I had, since I could work at 16, I had a job every year. So I had to, as soon as I left school, if I didn't have basketball practice or some other commitment, I went to work.
There you go.
So, yeah, you in college or whatever, or high school, talking about I'm still watching cartoons. Yeah. You may not be looked at like that dude, get a life kind of deal.
So I'll throw this question out to the audience. You're from the 80s or the 90s and you were in high school. Do you know anybody in your peer at that time who was not into sport or any kind of club what were talking about cartoon, knowing that if he was to talk about cartoon, he would either consider it be weird or what you all set up for the guys?
You were in the nerd club. You were in the, you know, and again, I was part of that as well. Like I said, I was a scrub on my basketball team. Wasn't like I was good. I'm not saying I was good. I was just on the basketball. I was the bench. I came in at scrub time, the last 2 to 5 minutes of a basketball game, put me in, coach. I get my 1 to 2 baskets and I'm happy, man. So again, I'm not even in that. I'm not even, it wasn't like I'm playing for state championships and stuff, or that I had scholarship aspirations. So I was part of, I was part of, D&D before champions and all that. Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons Club, all that
That was the
kind of
only
nerd
club
space.
that was legit in high school.
Yes, that nerds. But I didn't really get. Well, see, I wasn't really. Eric, I know he was into that stuff. I really, when I kind of became aware of stuff, was when Champions. So you talk about the late '80s, early '90s. Champions came aboard. I was a member of some of the campaigns that they went on. I just couldn't deal with it because, like I said, at that time, I'm like that dude who I got too many interests. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, I like sports, I like girls, and yeah, I like gaming, I like sci-fi and stuff. I'm just not married to it. So the thing with Champions was, it's like we get together like at 2:00, like 1, maybe 2:00. They're playing till midnight on a Saturday. I'm like, wait a minute. Now look, I like to play. Look, I like this, but I like girls more. I want to go to the movies. I want to go to the movies. I want to watch the basketball game. Or I want to go to the basketball game. It's like, y'all doing this every weekend?
Ladies and gentlemen,
I could never get, I was never a guy. Like I said, I can talk to anybody about anything for about an hour. I'll give you an hour. I could talk about Champions. I could talk about D&D. I could talk about cartoons. I could talk about movies for about an hour. After that, unless it's something that I was really hardcore into, I run out of ammo. I'm great at parties. I can go into any party. I can mingle with basically anybody, schmooze, talk to you for a few minutes. Hey man, nice meeting you. Yeah, I'll catch you later. Boom. Get into another conversation like that. But when you're talking about gamers, it's like it's 100% or nothing. Just like an athlete, you play in a high school basketball team. No, coach would tell you, no, this is your commitment. My coach didn't even want me having a job in high school. It was like, no, sorry, you're gonna have to give up McDonald's or whatever I was doing at the time. If you want to be a part of this basketball team, you be at every practice, every game, no exceptions. No, you can't skip practice because you got to go to work. I'm sorry.
So let me throw the
I had
gauntlet
to
out
make a
there
choice.
for our audience. If you're from the 80s, you know, for the 70 to 80 and the 70, 89 and the early 2000s, if you were in high school, I want you in the comment section after this show's over. Were you into the sport and to the girls? I'm talking to the guys side. And I'm talking about the ladies side. I'm talking about the guys side. Were you the sport and the girls? Or you was low key not letting people know that you were into anime, cartoon, whatsoever, but you had to keep it hidden so you don't lose no cool point.
Yeah.
Now for the ladies, if you're watching this show, were you the same whereby you make fun of guys who talk about cartoons and stuff, who not into your favorite topic like sport or whatever? Or you low key was into it, but you yourself had a conflicting issue because you were among a group of, I don't know, popular girls or naive or narcissistic girls, and you cannot share such idea because you either get kicked out from the group.
All right, now see Eric is saying, now again, he is correct. There were women in these gaming groups, but they weren't necessarily.
I can't.
How can I say this? And I mean this, no disrespect. They weren't the hot girl. We used to say hot back in the day. Oh, she's so hot.
Yeah.
They weren't the hot ones. Again, I got no beef against anybody, but they weren't like the ones. They weren't the cheerleaders. They weren't the girls who, again, they weren't the Bonita Applebombs. They
No,
weren't.
in other words, they wasn't the kind of one you would
They
take to the
weren't
prom.
them. Again, the cool nerd chick or whatever.
They wouldn't.
You
They
know,
wouldn't prom. Well, they wouldn't prom quality girls. When you could take to the
no,
prom.
no, they weren't. But again, they were smart. They were earthy. They were real. I give
Mm-hmm.
them all of that. But were they hot? And again, that I think that's changed over the years, though. It has, because again, when I went to Comic-Con with Pete, yeah, there was some hot.
No,
As
it
a married
changed
man,
in
I
the
would
mid
say
two
there was some
thousand.
very.
The mid
Was that?
2000, I think around 2010, 2011. That's where the shift came. And a lot of us
You had,
nerds,
yeah, you had
we were
very
pissed.
attractive
We were
men,
pissed
like
because you know
back in,
why?
yeah.
Before the 2010, we were being ridiculed, mocked, whatever you can think. They were called all kind of names because we was into this. For some apparent
I think it's
reason, there was a drastic shift.
no technology, because you had all these people. Remember the movie Revenge of the Nerds?
Thank you.
Okay, so again, in the 70s and 80s, the nerd was that archetype. You were the
Mm-hmm.
outcast. You didn't look good. You weren't handsome. You weren't muscular. You weren't
Right.
attract. Again, but what you had now, if you followed the Revenge of the Nerds series,
Mm-hmm.
you discovered that there were nerds on the down low. So the main jock of the film, that guy McGinnis, who was the quarterback on that, come to find out in sequels later that he was a nerd the whole time. He didn't just want to admit it. So I think what happened was, in the night with the internet, with YouTube or whatever, and when people started to say or shout out and say, "Hey, I'm into anime," when athletes started saying, "Hey, I follow this. Hey, I'm into this," I
And
think it made
that was a
it
shift change.
it made it cool.
But
So
the thing is,
again,
I was
you go to
pissed.
Comic-Con, you got very handsome men and scantily clad. I mean, if I was single and I went to Comic-Con, my head be going switching left, right, or whatever, what the girls were wearing. You had some very attractive women, sexy women,
And that
that
what pissed
again
me
would not
off.
have been part of that group back in the 80s. It just wouldn't.
And no, that's what pissed me off because the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s made it seem like we as nerds
Yeah.
are going to forever be the outcast.
No.
Our club
Yeah.
was this small.
It was. But then people were like, "Oh, this is."
Now all of a sudden, 2010, our club got hijacked, went from being this to being like.
Everybody wanted to be a part of it, because again, you had, like I said, you had athletes and entertainers who would say, "Look, I grew up reading this, or I grew up watching this. I grew up watching, Dragon Ball Z or whatever." It's like, "Oh, you in?" It's like, so then everybody was like, "Oh, I guess it's okay to come out."
DJ
It's just
Hemp,
like the other social. It's like the
DJ
other
Hemp said
social
this.
transformations that have happened in the culture over the last few years. A lot
DJ
of
Hemp
people
said
were
it on
in
his
the
show.
closet, and they
The Paul.
decided to come out.
Mr. Paul, DJ Hemp said it on his show, and he admitted. He said, "We in a football team, we cannot, we like kind of like say back or we have to like locate it, not realizing later it would end up being popular and cool.
Exactly.
They were
Yeah.
able to come out, but
That's
why?
right.
Why they were part of the club, but
All the and they would watch, and no one would come to your defense. Like, you saw I was getting bullied by that guy. Why didn't you say anything? You were with us, but you were protecting your image the whole time. So
that part, DJ Hemp, yes, I'm calling you out. You are a traitor. You had me on your show about nerd the other day. You tried to question my nerddom. I was like, really, you want to go there? And you were low-key underground hiding your part, trying to be all the cool cat, while we know we're getting picked on? Nah. And this is funny, because even though we still on the top of the show, there was a nerd fandom when it comes to these cartoons. These cartoons had a significant impact on these people's life. But finding out later on, now it's cool to be a nerd now all of a sudden.
Yeah.
2010, then Comic-Con became a... Because before the Comic-Con, you used to think called the flurries. I used to make fun of it. Like, everybody dressed up a look kind of flurry. They had the helmet, They got the tail. I was like,
Yeah.
no, thank you. It went from that to much bigger than what it's becoming a global phenomenon. All the cool girls that you never thought would get into what you're into, all of a sudden they shut down your convention, scantily clad, and you're like,
exactly. Now Eric's saying there was hot chicks at the conventions in the 90s. Look, I'll take his word. He was there. I wasn't there. I didn't really get back into the stuff until again the 2020s, quite frankly. So he was much more intimately involved with the circuit than I was. I was, married with kids and stuff, so I wasn't really tapped in until going back. But I just know from my experience, hot girls just weren't into that. They wanted to go to the mall. They wanted to go to the parties. They wanted to go to
the games. The undercover one. They were hiding their image.
Yeah.
Because when we became so popular, now everybody, we are like, really? When we were getting chewed out in elementary school, middle school, and high school, why didn't you protect us? Why didn't you take our side? Now, because it's popular and it's money making, now you want to join the club? No, you're paying a fee. Forget that. Paying your fee. Pay some due. You own us. That's how I feel. Like, if you want to join our club and you are low-key hiding, this is a script you have to pay from now on.
Yeah.
And an apology fee. I'm sorry for not protecting you. I'm sorry for not backing you.
You want to go on a revenge tour. That's your thing. I don't hold any grudges. You know what I mean? It's like, look, I am where I am with stuff. You want revenge. You have some.
I remember that all the nerds who got picked on at elementary school,
need to let it go, man.
School, and
let it go.
You're throwing donut, you're throwing cupcake on it. Nah, you want to be part of the Ku Klux? Nah, pay a fee. Pay a fee.
Oh man, it's
cool.
a new look. It's a new day, man. It's
I'm
we're gonna say it's a new day.
I get it, but it kind of like felt like really.
Although I would say, now I'd say this. Now again, I mentioned about the attractive women. It's almost X-rated. Because I know a guy, King Smith. I know he's a good friend of Pete's. He was at a convention recently. He had some footage that he showed on Facebook, and some of that stuff was like very adult. I mean, you had strippers, you had women doing twerking dances and poles and stuff. I mean, like there's an element of this thing that I didn't. Now again, you always had Valkyrie women, right? You had heavy metal magazine. You had the barbarian looking women, the Valkyrie type of. So that element has kind of always been there. That sexy kind of woman has always kind of been there. And then obviously, I think what probably blew everybody away was when Carrie Fisher came out in that outfit in Return of the Jedi. That just that probably had nerd guys flip out.
The Return of the Jedi movie. That outfit was that we played too many times. Rewind, everybody. Play. Rewind, play. Rewind.
You had a lot of you had a lot of guys who they did some. I'll just say this: they just did some things when that came out, because that was like the dream that came out. And shout out to not only to Leia, but also you had the Twilight dancer. That was a black woman, by the way. The Twilight dancer got eaten by the monster, whatever. I mean, that was, again, for a Star Wars film to see that kind of thing. And then what happened years later? You had all these conventions, women dressed in very scantily clad, barely covered outfits, painted in blue paint or green paint or whatever it was, at these conventions. And so again, the bondage whips and that stuff, I don't know how that all melded in with the nerd space, but it's there. Like I said, Comic-Con, I saw some of that when he was posting some stuff. I'm like, oh wow. It's like, because it's like, oh, do I want to take the wife to this or whatever? My wife may be looking at me like, man, what you bring me to? Is this a go-go? Is this a adult cinema convention, or is this a? I thought we were going to talk about cartoons here, but
before you take a wife to that, I think you need to give an introduction how people get too far, because
she would,
Because the thing is, Comic-Con or Anime Con, we want to call it, there are people who like to look exactly like the character that's still on the anime or to the game. Now, some take it a little too further than that because every year in Comic Con they have a competition who had the best out for the best costume, and
Yeah.
they get prize money. Now, I never knew it was a thing until you see people show the video on how much work they put in
Yeah.
to make their costumes
And they're
so
not covering.
realistic.
They're not wearing stockings or anything. It's just skin on skin, and they just parade around in stuff that would be
And
indecent
and they did it
anywhere
on
else.
purpose. They do it on purpose. There are some people who I'll say have low class, but those
No,
who will
but there's.
compete,
I mean, I think there's exhibitionists, and like I said, I think
that
that
you're correct.
certainly these people, like I said, these people they probably go to a nudist beach if they could,
And you're
but
correct.
it's a
But there was the
way
other
for
group
people to
that
really express, especially women. You can be in this environment where if you express yourself, to have the crazy hair and the eye colors and the
true,
contact lenses and the
true.
fangs and the it's just for, I think for, so again, I don't know when that happened. I don't remember that from the 70s and 80s because, like I said, the girls back then who were into that stuff really weren't that. But
And I'll say this:
something happened.
the other group I was referring to, who were going the best costume, what I found out later on, some of the people who won the award for best costume were the ones who were getting the offer to be building up the new costume for either a new movie or a new show. Because when they see the level of detail, how well you put the costume together, it's almost like open a door for saying, you know what? Since you are that good in this, we're doing this type of TV show or movie, and we want you to design the costume for the character. If you that good, because it depends on what theme of the costume you're building. If it's based on a sci-fi, it's based on a western, and the level of detail of the costume. Because there were people who were very, very gifted who came into the Comic Con and they put on the costume that took a month to put together because a month to get prepared, and they want to make sure when they go in there, they win the championship, they win the award for the best costume. And those who were doing it was end up getting a job afterwards. Because when they got the award, they put them to the side like, how long would it take you to build costume for this type of movie set? And they give you that, if you can really pull it off and you good. Right there and there, if you were unemployed, you would employ in less than a few months, making who know how much. Design the costume for the movie or TV show, whatever, because it was like another avenue created for other folks who were very artistic. Yeah, there was that group that you mentioned that scandalous with it, and that would be always
I was. Well, Pete, he kind of, he took from the last year, he took some pictures when he was there. So some of the women were kind of, again, but he's a single guy. Yeah, this very busty woman, and you're gonna be taking pictures. Yeah, all that's fine. So I knew, and I told him when we went, I said, look, I'm not gonna be doing that with you. You want to go take your pictures with your models or whatever. Go ahead. I was like, look,
Why is it called my name?
I'm a married man, so I can't be going to the same rooms that you're going into.
I don't give a shit. You still did.
But I did not. Stop
Yeah,
lying.
you did.
You lying. You is a liar. The devil is a liar. But the
Let me talk to your wife for a minute. She didn't tell her what room you really went into. Hint, hint.
The devil is a liar. But we were just saying how,
as much as he didn't want to.
I'm just saying the what we were talking about before you came back was how sexualized, if so to speak. Like back when in the 70s and 80s, all the women were kind of nerdy. Like nerdy, the girls who were into this kind of stuff, they were kind of nerdy, not so much concerned about looks or makeup or femininity or whatever. And then something flipped or something happened where you had more adult elements start to come into the space. And now you can go there and there's a lot of hot, I'm showing my age because we used to say hot. I don't think people say hot anymore.
I do.
That was definitely an 80s thing, but still, there was a lot of hot women, I would admit, at Comic-Con. And then when King posted his when he went to his recent convention that him and his girl went to, and there was stuff going on there. I'm like, man, what is this? You got strippers, you got stripper poles, you got all kinds of stuff. So there's an element of that is sort of come into this sort of nerd space that certainly wasn't there in the 80s or from what I remember. But
Mm-hmm.
now it definitely seems to be a thing that is yes. I mean, growing up, we did not see that at a
Here's a
at a
funny
show.
story. Here's a funny story with this one. So CQ was going to interview this woman. She's one of the top cross dressers. Cross dressers, did I say that right? Whatever.
Cosplay. Yeah.
Cosplay. Thank you. All in the states. She's going to retire this uniform you're watching. She turned around to Mike and whispered, and he's like, "If I take an inch to the left or inch to the right, it's going to rip down the middle and everything's popping out." She goes to Mike. So Mike comes over, is like, "Yeah, I'm not interviewing her." Like, like she goes over, he whispers, I'm like, I'm starting laughing my ass off. Like, I feel bad for that poor girl. Like, she could not move left or right. She was literally stuck in that position. You've seen her.
Yeah. Yeah.
She might have move a little bit, but it was literally ripping in the seams. That's why she was returning that costume because it was done. But most of them, like you see here, yeah, you're right, Paul. As much I hate to agree with you on this one a little bit, because obviously the decade you grew up, chasing women, they were dressing different than now. I think they over sexualize themselves on the public view.
Mhm.
Like example, those videos I showed you. Okay, fine, it's a movie's a movie, whatever. A game is a game, whatever you're gonna say. But people take uh, reality into fiction into real life now,
Mhm.
and that is one of the problems we're having.
Right.
Where do you divide those lines?
Well,
When
again,
you
yeah.
like
Well, certainly
group,
the
right?
anime's always been in my from what I was exposed to. And again, I got to give my boy Eric. He showed me Appleseed and Robot
Okay.
Monster City and all that. Anime was always sexualized to me. Very sexual
Yes,
nature compared to American product. That was something that was very, very evident. Now, again, I don't know in Japan if that kind of stuff was available to kids. That I don't know, but I just know that what I was exposed to, there was a lot of sex in it, and so so the fact that you have women who are kind of again living that out or taking the costumes of the characters or the whatever it is, and bringing that out and walking around on the convention floors and whatnot with that on uninhibited. Again, that was something that again you just didn't see back in the day, or they might have said, especially in the 80s, like even Leia's costume, anything even at Comic-Con or whenever, I don't even remember when Comic-Con started, but I'm just saying, but anybody who would have been walking the floor like that, even back in the day, somebody might have called her out for indecent exposure. I'm just saying, unless you were at a beach or something, that was the only way you could get away with wearing something like that. Now,
first Comic Con was in New York City in 1964.
okay, so again, you might have had some, but again, I don't know if they would have
Cosplay
allowed
didn't
for
start
that
to the
kind of
70s.
scantily clad in that
Yeah.
time, or definitely, like I said, the Twilight Dancer. I don't think they could have allowed that back then in the 80s. I think even then there was a level of conservatism that I don't think would have allowed it. But today, I think you can wear almost anything you want now with these things.
So the cosplay you're talking about, what we're used to seeing at cons, at events, and all that stuff, it did not really start picking up into the late '90s. Actually, I can't say early '90s. I say probably closer to 2010s and
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
because that's where the movement of sexuality, I call it,
hmm
because things are starting moving around at the time. Like, oh, it's okay to dress a certain way. Remember in the '90s when girls used to dress those tight jeans and their thong
yeah,
used to show on their side?
yeah.
That was the evolution of the sexuality we have now.
Now
Now
they're just wearing the
leggings,
thongs outright.
yeah, now leggings. I'll give example leggings. I love a girl with leggings. Don't get me wrong,
Mhm.
but you cannot sit there and tell me that's not a partial of sexuality.
Yeah.
Like, how many women do you know? I'm not talking about your family. Women you know working with or associated with somebody who owns a pair of leggings.
Quite a few. I mean,
Probably everyone.
yeah, it's definitely it's a more common thing
Trade.
now.
Yeah,
But like I said, it's to the point. Like, but when you go to Comic-Con or some of these conventions, it's almost like it's a reason. Like you could be buttoned up all year.
exactly.
It's a reason to be in. It's an environment to be an exhibitionist. So I think exhibitionism has certainly introduced itself into the convention circuit, and nobody pushes back, especially now with my body and things of that nature, and body shaming is against and stuff. So I think a lot of that stuff is I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. Someone would have to literally come out stark naked before somebody would say something about, hey,
See,
you
I
need to cover
understand the
that up. That's
whole
too much.
body thing and body shaming, but at a certain point, when you see a woman or a man walking down who's, or how can I put this? Hungry hippos are coming through here. Like you hear boosh, 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 and like and the ground is shaking. Like whoa, dude, that is way too fucking tight for your, for your physique. You shouldn't like. Sometimes like I see girls who are overweight, and I'm not trying to shame anybody. You should not be fucking worrying that. I'm
But I'm saying,
sorry.
but even if you have the body, I mean, like I said, there was some very, just like in the pictures that you saw, a lot of very attractive built women who probably spend a lot of time on their physiques
Yeah.
in the gym and doing their thing. No question about it. I'm just saying, but where do you come to a limit to say that's indecent for a public setting where again there are
So
kids,
all three
people
girls
bring
I
their
showed,
kids to Comic Con, and I'm like, is there a line?
all three girls I showed, the Roger Rabbit one, the Mortal Kombat one, and I remember the other one was.
Hmm.
They all are professional cross players. All
Hmm.
right, that's what they do for a living.
Don't forget Street Fighter.
Yeah, no. I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Street Fighter. I'm talking about the girls' outfits. It was Roger Rabbit was one of them, and all that I showed you a minute ago. So that's what they do for a living. They go to the gym. They don't charge you for autographs for a reason, because the autographs are, that's how they make. They don't care about that because that's not how they make their money. Is cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Every picture they take is dot, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. They hear dollar signs. That's
Hmm.
how they make the money. So they have
Hmm.
to put the time in the gym. They have to worry about. If, let's say one of them are married. Let me ask you, Paul. You're the only legit married one right now on the panel.
Hmm.
No offense, David. I didn't mean. Sorry, David. Between you guys, let me rephrase it. I apologize, David. Between you two gentlemen who are dating or not dating, are married, both of you guys
Hmm.
who were married and are married or whatever. If you see your wife who is a cross player, would you be upset her dressing like that as a living, as a profession? I'm talking about just
Oh
dressing,
yeah,
taking
yeah,
pictures.
that wouldn't fly if she's doing that. Especially now, if she wants to wear, if she wants to surprise me on my birthday and wear that, yeah, yeah. My wife has a license. She could put the Princess Leia dress on. She could put on any cosplay dress or whatever. She has my absolute. I
Okay,
got
let me
no
throw
issue
you
with that
a
in
catch
private.
22 before you. I catch 22. Let me ask David. Dave, what do you think about that?
Uh, Only at home in the man cave.
Right? What happened if
No,
she's making? Hang on. Here's the twist. 22. What happened? She's making 80,000 per video. I mean, per picture.
No, I mean that.
let me be real with you. That had to be discussed beforehand because first and foremost, I need to know what kind of costume you're wearing at that moment, at that time, and how much will be a problem for me or not. Because at this present time in today's society, you would say it's not much of a big deal. I will not say that's not the case because first and foremost, no one's above mistake, and not everybody say they have a great strength or restraint or control themselves. 80,000 per outfit or whatever you want to call it. That will be a startup. It will literally lead to something much bigger, much worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
And all about a moral compass, how far you go, how far you're not going to cross the line. Because let's be real, there are some people do 80,000 for a costume to something that's much bigger than that and much bigger price tag thrown into play. Then you're saying you do anything for a price tag. You then I say something like that, it's very something you have to discuss first and see the limit and variation of how far that will go. Because for one, if it's someone offer you more money to do certain things that a little bit crazy, you need to do it. That means there's no limitation how far you go.
Well, it's the difference between a model and that, then, David.
No,
A model
that
is still worth,
I I
you know,
I get what you're saying. I get your
yeah.
point. But the thing is, when you are married, there's a threshold that you cannot just overlook. Perfect example. Russell Simmons, blah, blah. What was his name? The football player and his yet wife?
Tom Brady.
No, not Tom Brady. I'm talking about the guy who put to be a Christian and married Sierra.
Oh,
Oh,
Russell Wilson. Yeah, Russell
Russell
Wilson.
Wilson.
And
he's a sports head around here, not me.
Yeah. My thing with that thing is like that's a level of contradiction whereby you lose your credibility because for one, before you met her, you came out as someone who was credible and very respectful. Then you marry a woman who is destroying your image in a slow process. So whatever foundation that you built for yourself in the public and you have a woman do as such, it puts you in a predicament whereby those who know you before her will start to question your views and your morality afterward. If you see as you allow her to do certain things, they will start looking at you like, why should we trust your judgment?
Mm.
It's
Yeah,
like a
I don't think.
business.
Well, one, I mean, I follow. Obviously, he was with the Steelers his last year, so I follow his career quite a bit. I don't think he took any real hits at all regarding his image, unless except for the most conservative of Christian people. But from the
Mhm.
Gen Pop, no, I don't think he took a hit at all. The biggest hits in his career is that he hasn't just played well, or certainly not to the level he was in early in his career. So again, you're allowed to get away, especially with a lot more things, if you're still performing at a very high level. Since then, his career's kind of come down a bit, and so he gets more criticism from that. Not the fact that he's married to Sierra. In fact, if anything, it's more feather of his cap that he's married to her now. Because again, at the time when he married her, people were saying, "Well, why'd you marry her?" Because he was the top guy, and it's almost like he married down. But certainly, as his career is starting to wane, and now hers is still kind of at a high level, then it's almost like it's turning around. Now it's like, well, he's good that he's with her. So again, I just don't see following him the way I followed him. Again, unless you're ultra conservative Christian type of person or whatever, I haven't seen him get a ton of flack for the choice that he made. And me personally, again, I don't mind the decisions you make as long as you go in with your eyes wide open. I don't, I don't judge that. It's like, look, you made your bed, you live with it, and so far they're still in bed together. So I can't, I can't judge that
And
too
I
much. But
get that point. That's why I'm saying I put in that aspect because for one, if I put in that put my time that I have to be careful and talk that with my woman, what will be limited that I will accept because anything beyond that, it could be a little bit complicated. Because
well,
somehow
Pete, let's ask you, what would you do if your wife?
Oh, I'm on your side. I'm on your side. I agree with
Okay.
you guys 100% what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It that's a very hard question to even ask her because, excuse me, because if that's what she does for a living. She's not doing anything else. She's just taking photos and that's it. And you know that for a
uh-huh.
fact. Nothing extra activities. Hint, hint.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Just plain a photo shoot. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And nothing else. It's a rough one.
I just wouldn't want this. I just wouldn't want the scrutiny, especially. I mean, again, in my situation in particular, I got 3 daughters. So again, the daughters got to deal with it. All these fanboys, making comments about them.
Oh.
I just wouldn't want to, I wouldn't get involved. Or if an opportunity like that did come up, with my wife, I would most likely I would pass on her doing that. But even
See,
if she
one thing
didn't do that, if she tried to build, is to me it'd be the same if she tried to become an IG model or something like that and just started showing scantily clad pictures of herself to build credits that way. I mean, that wouldn't be cool with me. Cool with me either. And I don't think I would certainly go for somebody. Look, I don't begrudge you making that decision. That's what you want to do. Would
Mhm.
I drop in your DMs though? I don't think so. I mean, so yeah, keeping a relatively low profile or keeping it kind of conservative, keeping it in the bedroom. I got no issues whatsoever with that. And I probably wouldn't even if I had to do it again. With like I said, I've always been a person like your past doesn't have to be your present. So what if say you came from a background like that? Where in your younger days you did certain things or whatever, and now you're living a different lifestyle. Say, hey, I don't need it anymore. Is that a deal breaker for me? Maybe, probably not. But again, you would have to show me that again you're moving and you're operating differently. But I don't. Everyone's got to pass. And again, people judge me when I was 21 or whatever. I don't know. People would have the same opinion of me or whatever. So I try to give some grace in that regard also. But it's really how you're moving now would be what I would judge on. But certainly as we come to the end of the show, Pete, I know we talked about Mask for some time. Your recollection of the show, or what do you did you watch it growing up, either in
Oh
reruns or
God, yeah,
something?
bro.
I think we talked Mask to
Wait a minute,
death.
this
That's
was
why
my
we kind of
idea
went
to
into
do the
this other
show.
area, huh?
It was my idea to do this show.
Okay, so we haven't heard. I don't think we've heard from you really in terms of your view
Yeah,
and take on the show and whatnot. But I think we talked Mass to death. That's why we kind of got into these other areas because I think we did our best with the
first of all, I
We
told
got we went on the money side of things. We're calling out the money spot.
You've reached your limit on talking. Shut the fuck up.
one night you don't. I mean, like, you always want me to hit the goddamn button. So like my little buddy. Shut the fuck up for a minute. Let me talk. I want to first of all, I want to apologize to all our fans tonight, our followers. I wasn't on because I'm under the weather, obviously, and I want to get some rest so I can actually kick his ass tomorrow on the gray area with Paul. So working 75 hours a week is kicks your ass fast.
Ooh.
Yeah. Don't ask me how I did it. I looked at my pay my hour this week. I'm like, oh, what the fuck? I think I have too many numbers there. Anyway, Mask is a show I grew up on in Greece on Junior TV. It was something. It was reruns, of course, but it was excitement. It was that Thundercats, Voltron, Robotech, Saber Riders. Those were the series. Anytime I put on that Junior TV, is one of those repeating each other over and over and over. So I always thought to myself, why didn't this pick up more? If I ask you about Mask, if you type in Google Mask, the movie comes up, not the anime. You have to put cartoon in the end of the series. They made a movie. I'm going back two different franchises, so don't get confused. So that's where I came up with the idea. Like, where should we go with this? Obviously, the bug hit me, so I couldn't even put my 2 cents into now. Obviously, you can hear my goddamn voice as like a crooked.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mask is a unique franchise to me. I don't put it under Thundercats. I don't put it under Voltron. I think it has their own unique spin to it. Like Paw Patrol. There's another one from the 80s. That didn't pick up either. That was more a knockoff version of Knight Rider. I think it was Paw Patrol, then Knight Rider came out, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember which one came out first. But how can you make a unique series without copying somebody off each other? You tell me that. Nobody can answer that question. Can you guys answer that? No? What about you, Paul? Can you answer that somehow?
I'm sorry. Can I?
Like, can you make a unique series, a brand new cartoon series, without copying off somebody else? A little bit.
Well, I don't know. Well, unless you go back 1,000 years.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about now.
But my point is like I don't think you can. I don't think you
Exactly. That's my
I mean,
point.
Star Wars is basically a rehash of Kurosawa films and those old stories. He took elements and he put a story together. So I think storytelling in unique ways or going into a direction that people aren't used to. It's such a hit or miss because if you make it too foreign, then people can't relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you're always going to have to go off of some themes that are familiar. Like I mentioned earlier, it had elements of Mission Impossible. If you remember the old 1960s Mission Impossible, part of the show had a very similar theme. Assemble the team. Who are the people who are selected for the teams? There'd be people who were martial artists. There were people who were disguise artists. There were people who were good technically, just like the old Mission Impossible show. Again, you had the transforming cars. So again, we know where that we know where that came from. And then you added the mask, the powering up of the mask, whatnot. That might have been new at the time because I don't remember seeing that. So again, the mask portion of powering up the mask and everybody getting theirs and the mission detail and going off and doing the thing, that was very unique. But again, barring from these other elements, again, even the kid and the robot that turned into like a little wheelie cycle or something, again, that's been borrowed. The R2D2 or C3PO having the droid for comic relief. I mean, that's something that, like I said, Battle of the Planets did. A lot of shows had that kind of thing, even with with He-Man, Cringer, came off as this until he changed into Thundercat, into Battle Cat.
I give a better example. Jake the Weird Warriors had a robot. It was a little dorky robot, but it was a robot-esque comedian. Also,
Yeah.
Power Rangers, you have Alpha 5. Everyone copying after somebody.
Yeah, but He-Man had Krieger and
I
Oreo,
say He-Man.
the wizard, who
I
was
said
kind
Jake
of
the Weird
dorky.
Warriors.
Jake and the Wheel Warriors. Yeah. Yeah. The
Yes.
Wheel.
Okay.
So that was a similar of copying off Star Wars again. I'm using Star Wars because that's the most popular one. If it had a
You're
robot,
right.
it was a little dorky, but comical. Power
You're
Ranger
right.
had Alpha 5. Comical, but funny still. You see where I'm going with this?
Mm-hmm.
How can you make a new series? You can. You can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but that's part of that too. Would have been, like I said, I would have paid more attention had there not been such a saturation of the market at the time. When all those shows, Thundercats, Transformers, Voltron, G.I. Joe, on and on and on, all these shows, it wasn't unique enough to stand out. But like I said earlier, what would have saved the show or would have given a much more run is if you gave less of it. Because again, they had enough episodes in the first season to do 2 or 3 seasons with. And you would have outrun the Transformers and G.I. Joe era that died in 1886. Basically, both of those franchises were over. You could have been the last person standing, but you gave too much and people couldn't appreciate it because, again, when you're dealing with a crowded field and you said you saw it in reruns. But again, a network had to decide that we're going to show this show. I don't know if even growing up that you have the variety of shows from all those titles that I mentioned earlier. When you were in Greece, did you have so many shows on so many channels that you could keep up with everything?
Okay, no. For one reason was we only had cartoons on the weekends. First of all, weekends
Yeah.
morning, Saturday and Sunday. Sometimes a Sunday late because everybody usually goes to church on Sunday, so cartoons won't start till at least 1 in the afternoon
Mm-hmm.
for an hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
But the only channel we used to watch was Junior TV. Junior TV used to play all the same ones again.
Correct.
Jake the World Warriors. No, Jake War wasn't there. I'm sorry. Saber Riders. M.A.S.K, Voltron, Thundercats, Silverhawks, Brave Star, and so on. It goes on and on and on. Some of them, if I
Right.
mention, you probably already know. There's some Greek ones. I mean, other ones. There was
Mhm.
something in French. I'm like, what the fuck am I watching here?
Yeah.
But that's the only thing I had up to me.
Right. And that can be a beautiful thing. Sometimes, again, too many choices can lead to, again, things getting missed or not appreciating what you had. The fact that, like I said, imagine all the shows that I talked about came on Monday through Friday, and you had the Saturday morning stuff on 3 networks. 2, 4, and 7 had their own Saturday programming for cartoons or child's entertainment. Sometimes you had to like the live action shows like the Croft Super Show and those things back in the day.
Does she become a villain?
Imagine all of that competing at the same time, and every
Wow,
week
that's
you had to decide: do I want to watch this? He keeps talking about the Inhumanoids, which I wasn't really into. But again, let's say if you were a fan
And
of
I
the
remember
Inhumanoids,
watching it. It wasn't the greatest show. It was okay.
Right. But I'm just saying you had all that going on. What you're gonna have to pick, at least here anyway. You basically dealt with what they fed you, what you had available. So sometimes less is more, less is better, unless you're gonna be able to put the time in to watch all these things. Like I said, at the time, since I'm older than both of you guys, it definitely I had to make some choices between work, basketball, sports or study, whatever it was. I couldn't watch a ton of TV. So the shows that had my interest, Voltron, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Thundercats.
What made everybody?
You're going to have to compete with those to get my time.
So when you were coming up, the VCR just came around, right?
But no, the VCR came out in the late 70s.
I'm saying it was more horrible.
It didn't
Let me rephrase that.
become viral or didn't hit critical mass until like 84, 85. When it hit, when every household
Mhm.
had a VCR, you're talking about like the mid 80s, or most households had at least a two head. You had a two head. The higher quality was the four head. That was like $150 more. And
There are
again,
different
not
heads.
every household had it, but again, you had limitations because you got probably you're only going to have one VCR in the house, and who gets ownership of it? So you got your mom. Your mom wants to tape her soap operas and she wants to watch the soap operas when she gets home. Your dad wants to watch the crime shows or the sporting events, and then you want your cartoons, but you can only record on one channel at a time. Some of these cartoons were playing on different networks at the same time. So, like with me and David's case, you had Fox 5 that had their suite, you had PIX New York had their suite. What are you going to watch unless you're going to be switching between channels, taking a little bit of this and a little bit of that? You couldn't record two shows at the same time.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I was going to say was when you had the VCR, I lived the VCR era a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
not much. Like
Yeah.
towards the end of the lifespan when DVRs were coming in, and DVRs were expensive at first. If you remember, they were like
Yeah. I think TiVo was like one of the first major ones that made it big was TiVo.
bingo.
Yeah.
And they were like 150 just to have the service plus the service you had on top.
Correct.
So when DVR came out and it was free, I was like, "Damn, what do you think about David? What do you think about this?"
I remember I said it earlier, but it was not going to be an easy task on that part because
I'm talking about VCR versus DVR.
you know you have DVR. How many black households have access to a DVR or some kind of? If they do, who's using the DVR or the VHS? Because I recall one of my responsibility was every Saturday morning, make sure you record New York Hot Track with the Paul. You know what show I'm referring to.
Yep. Yep.
New York Hot
I
Track?
was tapped.
New York Hot Trash that came on WABC at midnight Saturday
Okay, I
nights.
feel
Yes.
fucking young for once.
And
Yeah.
the tapes are only meant for that. That's one part. The other part on the soap opera. When you have a mom who into soap opera in your hard track, what are the chances you have to record any such thing without getting the ponytail belt, or you get the hovering with the slipper? You know how you hit? You know the slipper come. You hit that. If you don't dodge at the right time, you get the slipper hit you in the head. Pow! Or she had it in the head and hit you with it. So, for childhood memory, who had the luxury to record their favorite cartoon at that time?
Yeah. But even then, you could only pick one.
You know, it's a
Pick-
funny thing. The VCR in my household, the only one person who knew how to use it was me. And my parents didn't give a shit because they were always working on the line. They didn't know what it was, so I had the privilege, the only person probably in my whole neighborhood,
Yeah.
and probably the only one in the country, most likely.
You're lucky.
I have a VCR. Nobody knows to use it but me in the house. I have my own VCRs. But when DVR came out, it was I remember my neighbor, believe it or not, was my Jamaican neighbor who had it. And I was used to hang out with him because I was trying to hook up his sister, to be honest with you guys. So, and I was like, when I saw the DVD, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, actually. It was when Cablevision, I'm going way
Yep.
back. Cablevision was the only primary cable company in the world, in America at the time. And it was like 30 or 40 bucks extra. I'm like, fuck it, I'll pay for that extra. It was worth it. I could record 5, 6. After I had a DVR, that's it. I have to have it all the time. Now, everything's streaming. You don't need a DVR anymore. Imagine how much money I would have saved back then.
I get it.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's start closing out. You guys want to do your final thoughts?
I'll make my final thought short and sweet.
No, that's
My final thought on masks. I wish it was giving more of a second chance, like all the other big names that were given second chance throughout the 90s and the 2000s. But if it were to give it a second chance, get the right group of writers who can map out the character plan of the character and map out the secret of the episode so it makes sense. And I believe if it was done properly, to get at least 2 or 3 seasons out of it, and renew the love of people have for the cartoon. Other than that, it was a cool cartoon. I'm mad that it could not hang on long because of the juggernaut of all the other cartoon were put there behind. But that's my final thought.
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, I mean, if you're interested, for those who didn't get the opportunity to watch the show, just look up Mask on YouTube, full episodes. There's this one playlist that has all of them in order, that you could certainly go back and watch if you want to go back. But it's definitely in the mold of all those 80s cartoons of the day. Like I said, Voltron, Transformers, G.I. Joe, very similar to that thing. Again, lots of content. I just wish that they would have, again, spread the wealth a little bit. Spread, instead of 65 episodes in a year, spread it over a few years. It might have had a longer life, and it might have outlived and maybe stood by itself in terms of other products that were around at the time. But again, a good work. I actually enjoyed. I probably watched about 6-7 episodes today, and that's probably the playlist right there. That I was able to watch. I enjoyed, all of them. Like I said, the kid with the robot, that's a little silly or whatever. But I thought, some of the plot points that they had, I thought were pretty good. And yeah, decent show. But it was just, as David said, it was just competing in a land of tall trees with all of these other products that and it's just hard to compete in a crowded field, and didn't get necessarily the push that it needed. But again, some of those guys got there first, and how you're able to sustain that. Yeah, that's going to be a challenge for anybody, pretty much. So you have to be mindful of that. And but again, I enjoyed the show. It's definitely worth a watch. And yeah, that's about it. Good topics tonight. I know we went all over the place, but good conversation with David as always.
I want to thank you guys, both of you guys, for picking up the slack when I was down on the ground for a little bit.
We got
I
you.
appreciate both of you guys.
No,
before we
bro.
go-
I would hope Wally would come in because we would have to dissect it more. But the
Oh,
thing
you,
is,
you will on your show on
I know,
Wednesday,
and
Anime Wednesday.
we did the correction episode for the hangout.
Anyway,
But
let's go real quick.
it was a good
Schedule update.
conversation. It was
Paul,
a
do
good
you want to
conversation.
mention tomorrow's show really fast?
Yeah, so tomorrow night's show, I think I'll give you two updates
Orders.
on the gray area show. So tomorrow's show, we're going to be dealing with interfaith marriages, which is a thing. It's growing, and it's definitely something that I think worth a conversation. But it's gone up dramatically over the last few years, and so having a conversation on that. And then, hey, Wally, and next gray area show, we're going to deal with the topic of corporal punishment as a topic. So again, looking forward to those shows on the gray area. Also, our hangout show for the 12th, we're going to be dealing with the subject of God and superheroes and our affinity for them. So we're going to be talking about that that's the 12th, April 12th episode of the Hangout. So definitely invite for those who want to have a more serious conversation on the matter. But I do think there are connections between why we enjoy superheroes, and certainly why we're religious. I think there's a connection there, and I just want to have a conversation with that. I think Jedi Mike looks to be a part of the conversation. Look to maybe get a couple more people who can also be part of that conversation as well. But again, I'm definitely looking forward to the topic. So yeah, so we got some heavy hitting shows, intellectual shows coming up. Like you guys to be certainly a part of the conversation and in the following. So yeah, definitely looking forward to to these upcoming shows.
The other two more episodes I want to mention is coming up is Outlaw Star next week on Wednesday. This week coming up Wednesday. Sorry guys, David and Wally are going to be breaking that down. I'm looking forward to that one. And on Thursday, we're going to be talking about time to step up. That's all I'm going to say. I'll let you guys diagnose that. That is a topic from my Motivation Mondays when I used to do that stuff. So just keep in mind, we got a lot to talk about on Thursday about stepping up.
Awesome.
Wally, before we go, do you want to say anything really fast? Wally?
Yeah, good. Keep going.
You want to say anything before we go? Because we're about to end the show.
Nah, no, you're good.
All right, guys. As always, this was a Spartan Institute Network. I am Ghost of Sparta, the sick Ghost of Sparta. He's David. He is Mr. President. My little Wally over here. Stay fresh, stay safe. I'll see you guys on the next one.